Welcome to the Learn to Sew Academy channel. Please remember to subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me in this new video, and thank you for subscribing to our channel. And if you haven't already, please be sure to click on the subscription button to make sure that you're subscribed to the channel, and don't forget to click on the bell icon so you can get notified when we load new videos. So in this video we're going to be making a box pleated skater dress. And before we start, I just want to go over how we determine how wide we want our pleats to be. The number of pleats you will have will determine how wide each pleat will be. If you want a lot of pleats in the bottom part of the dress, then your pleats are going to be smaller than if you want the pleats to be big and wide. In that case, you won't use too many pleats. In this particular case, I'm going to be using a total of 8 pleats. They're going to be uniform. They're going to be the same sizes. So how to know what I'm going to need for each pleat is to use my waist, and the waist we're using here is 26 inches. So you will take that waist and you will divide that by 8, because I want 8 number of pleats all around the skirt. That's the lower part of the dress. So the 26 divided by 8 gave me 3.25. So for each pleat, I'm going to be doing 3 1/4 for each pleat. Now, to know how much fabric I need for that box pleated part of the dress, I simply have to take the waist and multiply that by 3. So I'm using 3 times my waist, so which is going to be 78. That's my 26 times 3 is 78. And then I'm going to add some allowances, which I'm using 3.5 for my allowance for that part. So that 3.5 is actually going to be my allowance at the back, because I'm not going to be dividing this fabric on the side. It's going to be one continuous stretch of fabric, and I'm only going to be joining it at the back. The length of the dress I'm making today is 41 inches, and I just want to cut out the lower part of the dress first. So what I've done here is, since we have determined how much fabric I need, I know I need a fabric of 81. So this right here is 81 inches of fabric when I measure the width of it. So I already cut this out. And then the length is going to be whatever the full length is, less my half length. And the half length that I'm using for this dress is 15 inches. So the 41 inches full length less 15 inches left me with 26 inches for lower part of the dress, which is the skirt part of the dress. So this right here is the 26 inches plus the allowance. So I've added an allowance of 1.5 to this piece. Half is for the upper part where I'll be joining this to the bodice, and then the lower part I left 1 inch for my hemming at the bottom. So what I'm going to start doing now is to cut the bodice. Because of this pattern, what I want to do is to use this part as the lower part where I'm going to be joining to the skirt, and then this part is going to be the neck area. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. I'm going to cut the front and the back together because they are going to be more or less basically the same thing. So what I want to do is, you want to fold it first like so, and when you fold, you want to make sure you have enough to cover the bust area, because that's the fullest part of the upper body. So what I have for my bust that I'm using for this project is 32, and half of 32 is 16. So I have way more than 16, which is what I'm aiming for, because part of this is going to be my allowance, and then I'm also going to have my zip allowance. So I'm going to fold this again so that I have 4 layers of fabric. And then we're going to start to mark our fabric. So at the end of this, I want 1.5 inches. So I'm just going to move this until I have 1.5 inches. I want to measure out my half length because this is way longer. So I'm going to measure out my half length first. And what I have for my half length is 15 inches plus 1 inch for the top where I'm going to be joining from and 1 inch at the bottom. So I'm going to be using 16 inches right there. So I'm just going to draw a straight line over here just to help guide me when I start to measure for the shoulder and other areas of the bodice. So now this is where I'm going to start measuring from, only because this is just the length I need. I don't need this other length. I can as well also cut this out. I'm gonna cut it out so that it doesn't confuse a total beginner. So I'm just going to cut out the portion that I need. So this is all the length I need for my bodice. So I'm going to start to measure for my shoulder. And when you start to measure, you measure from the center. This is my center front and this is my center back. This is where my zipper goes. So we measure from the center towards the side. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to be measuring for my shoulder. I have 15 inches. We divide that by 2. That gives us 7.5. Then we add our allowance, whatever we have chosen to be an allowance. We have that there in this. And then the next thing we want to do is to measure the armhole. In this project, the armhole we're using is 16 inches. So we divide that by 2. That gives us 8 inches. But when I start to cut this, I'm going to be slanting the shoulder area, and I'm going to be using 1/2 inch. So I'm going to factor that in as I determine where my armhole ends. So we have 8.5 here. That's 8. 16 divided by 2 is 8 plus the half that I'm going to be cutting off. So that's why I've chosen 8.5. Then this point is where I start to measure for the bust. And for this project, we're using a bust of 32 inches because this right here is folded into 4. If you check, we have 4 layers of fabric now. So we have these 2 for the front and 2 for the back. So that's why we are dividing by 4. And what I have there is 8 inches. And then you add your allowance. Again, we measure from the center. So your allowance can be anything from 1/2 inch to 1 inch, whatever works for you. So we're gonna add our allowance right there. And then we come to the bottom here. This waist is going to be 26 inches. Again, that one too, we divide that also by 4. Now, another reason we are dividing all this by 4 is that when you took a measurement of the bust and the waist, you went around the body, you took a circumference of that part of the body. So that's why we are also dividing by 4. So what I'm going to do here also is to divide 26 by 4, and that gave me 6.5. And now I'm going to add that. So for my dart, I'm going to be adding an additional 1 inch. Why I'm adding 1 inch is when we start to sew this, we're going to fold it in like this. We're going to have half this way, half is this way. That's how we're going to be making the dart. So that's the additional 1 inch to the 6.5 plus the seam allowance. Whatever we have decided to make a sewing allowance, we have to add that too. So again, we're doing the waist divided by 4. Whatever you get by from that, you add 1 inch for the dart, and you add whatever you have decided to make your allowance, whether it's half an inch, 0.75, or 1 full inch. You add that to the waist. Now the next thing is to connect all our markings. So my apologies, I didn't realize my video stopped recording, so I'm just going to explain what I did here. So right here I measured 4.5 from the midpoint for my dart, and that's because I want the dart to be 4 from the center. Remember, we're going to hold it like so, and we're going to be sewing half on both sides. So by the time we do that, it's going to be 4 inches from the center. So I just snip this place where the dart is a little, so I can be able to quickly find where my dart is going to be. For my neckline, I simply am doing a round neck for both the front and the back. And what I've done here is I just measured 4 inches this way by 4 inches. So I did a mark here and I did a mark here, and I connected that together, and that is what I cut out of this. So that's what I did for here. And then the next thing I'm going to do is to just put a shoulder slant, and normally I do half an inch. You can do 1 inch if you so desire. So I'm just going to do my slant right there. And I'm just going to put a notch at the middle so I know where my middle is, and that completes the bodice. And then the next thing I'm going to be working on, I'm going to do my sleeve real quick before I go on to the skirt. So for the sleeve, and I want to mention that for the neckline, you can do different necklines. You can decide to have a boat neck at the front and do a V-neck at the back, or you can decide you want a V-neck at the front and at the back. You can do whatever you decide to do, you desire to do for your front or back neckline. I have a video that explains how to cut different necklines, and I'm going to link that in the description. Be sure to check the description for that link, or I'll also link it on the video. So what I'm going to be doing next now is the sleeve, and I just want to measure what my armhole is, and right here I have 8.5. So this is going to help when I start to cut my sleeve. And I'm going to cut 2 sleeves together. I have some videos too on different techniques of cutting your sleeve. You can check that out too. I'll also leave a link to those in the video and on this video. So I'm going to just fold this first into 2 like that, and then I'm going to fold it one more time. Now as I fold, I like to make sure that I have enough for my armhole. So I have more than enough, so this is good for me. So my armhole again that I measured there was 8.5. I'm going to use a sleeve length of 8 inches, and I have way more than I need, so I'm just going to cut off that sleeve length. I want this part to be my sleeves, so I need a sleeve length of 8 inches, but I'm going to be adding half for the top and then 1 inch for the bottom for the hemming, plus my 8 inches. That will give me 9.5. So I'm just going to cut 9.5 from this. Okay, so now my sleeve round was 8.5. So when you start to cut, you start to measure from the full fold. So I'm going to measure my sleeve round. So I'm going to be using a sleeve round of 11 inches, and you divide that by 2. That gives you 5.5, and you add whatever seam allowance you desire to use. Again, you can use from half to 1 inch. And then I'm going to measure my 8.5. I'm using the freehand technique over here. So what I want to do is I just want to connect that point. Again, we're trying to find 8.5. And what you want to do is you want to make like an inverted S, slightly inverted S. So that's what I have there. And then I'm just going to join my sleeve round to that point. And now I'm going to cut this out. Again, I have a more detailed video on making sleeves. You can check that out. And then I'm just going to put a knot in the middle. And that's going to be the sleeve for this dress. So the next part that we're going to work on, the bodice is all completed now. For the facing, I'm turning this in like that. And then I put the dress on top of it and make sure the edge matches. Then I'm just going to cut that. So you can just use your scissors too and just cut that half and cut the edge. Then I'm going to do, I'm just going to do 3 inches. Just going to join those points. And that's what I'm just going to cut. And I'm going to make one for the back. So we're going to work on the skirt, the lower part of the dress. Remember that I already cut out what I need from this fabric. Depending on the allowances you left, I left 1.5 for both ends of my fabric. So this was going to be my zip allowance. So from there now I start to measure 3.25, 3 1/4. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. So I'm going to use my tape roll. I can use this my mat as well, but I'm just going to use my tape roll so that we all can see what I'm doing. Even if you don't have a mat, you just use a tape roll. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to be measuring 3 1/4 all across. Now you're going to need your pins for this. So now that we have the lines marked, the way you're going to do this is you take the fabric from where you have your first mark, you fold it together, and then you let it match your other point to the right. So that way it's facing to the right. And I'm going to use a pin to hold that. And then you take the next mark that you did, like so. And this way you're going to the other side, which is the left. You're matching that point together with your next mark that you made. and then you want to hold that in place too. So this is what you're going to keep doing. This is the next mark right here. So we're going to take this one too, let it meet the mark here. You want it as close as possible. And then you hold that in place with a pin. You want it really close. Really, really close. Some even may decide to let it overlap just a tiny bit so that there is no gap when you start sewing. Then at the back here, you want to make sure that they meet each other, the pleat from the right and the pleat from the left, they meet each other right here at the back. So we want to make sure that is happening too. As you make your pleat, adjust all the way from the bottom. Just pull it so that you're sure it's straight. And then you go to the next one right here. And we do what we did at the beginning. Just let it meet the next mark that we have here. I'm gonna hold it together vertically so you hold it some more. Then I'm going to continue marking my 3 1/4 as I go along. So this is what we're going to keep doing till we get to the end of the fabric. And again, we get this. We face it this way. Let it touch. Then we get the other point where we mark the fabric. We fold it to touch this other marking, and we hold that too. So I'm just going to continue doing that till I get to the end of the fabric. So I've completed laying the pleats, and I just quickly iron them. So this is what I have for my pleats. So what I'm going to do next now is I'm going to just run a basting stitch so I can hold the pleats together. So I'm going to sew this all across like that. That will just hold my stitch, and I have my 8 pleats. This completes the cutting of the box pleated dress. Be sure to join us in our next video. Thank you, and remember to thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks.